Who's afraid of a Christian Christmas? One of the more persistent ideas circulating online is that Christmas has little or even nothing to do with Christianity. We are told that Christ wasn't born in December, that the feast was simply copied from a pagan holiday, and that things like Christmas trees are leftovers from ancient nature worship that Christians absorbed without noticing. It's an appealing story. It feels subversive. It carries the promise of secret knowledge. And it happens to be far less secure than it sounds. To begin with, it's worth noticing that paganism itself is already a problematic category. It's not the name of a unified religion that ancient people recognized as such. It's a Christian umbrella term for anyone who wasn't Christian. The people of ancient Britain, Italy, or Scandinavia did not imagine themselves as participants in a single coherent faith called paganism, complete with a shared theology, calendar, and ritual life. They had local gods, local customs, civic cults, household practices, philosophical schools, and regional traditions. Lumping all of that together and treating it as one rival religion is a modern abstraction. So when someone says Christians stole pagan practices, the first question should be, which pagans exactly, and from where? Very often the claim assumes a level of religious unity that simply did not exist. The December 25th question is a good example. The Gospels do not give us a date for Christ's birth. That much is true. But from this silence, people often leap to the claim that Jesus definitely could not have been born in December, and that the date must therefore be a later invention designed to overwrite a pagan festival. That conclusion does not follow. Early Christians speculated about the date of Christ's birth quite freely. Different calculations circulated. Some Christians focused on the date of his baptism rather than his birth. Others attempted to reason forward from presumed dates of conception or crucifixion. What matters here is not that everyone agreed early on, but that Christians were already thinking in these terms well before any supposed need to copy a pagan feast. By the early 4th century, Rome is clearly celebrating the Nativity on December 25th. That is firmly attested. What is much less firm is the popular claim that a well-established empire-wide festival of Sol Invictus on December 25th clearly predates this Christian celebration. The strongest explicit evidence for Natalis Invicti on December 25th comes from the same mid-4th century calendar tradition that preserves the Christian nativity date. In other words, the two appear in the same documentary world. Claims that the pagan feast obviously came first often rest on assumption rather than hard evidence. More importantly, even if there were solar festivals in late December, and there were, this does not mean that Christmas is really pagan. It confuses three different things: natural solstice symbolism, generic winter festivity, and the specific cult of Sol Invictus. Humans notice the sun's cycle, they mark seasons, they celebrate light returning in darkness. None of that requires a particular pagan theology, and none of it automatically turns a Christian feast into sun worship. And this leads to a deeper problem with the appropriation narrative. It assumes that Christians should be embarrassed by pre-Christian culture, or that anything which existed before Christ must be rejected outright. That simply isn't how Christianity has ever understood itself. From the beginning, Christians believed that the world was created good, and that truth, beauty, and order were not confined to Israel alone. Clement of Alexandria explicitly argued that pagan philosophy prepared the Gentiles for Christ in the same way the Hebrew scriptures prepared the Jews. The Logos was not absent from the nations. What was true and good did not suddenly become evil simply because it existed before Christianity. Christianity does not reject creation. It rejects idolatry. And those are not the same thing. A date on a calendar is not an idol. A tree is not an idol. A melody is not an idol. A drum is not an idol. What matters is what these things are ordered toward. Richard Twiss, a Native American Christian apologist, makes this point very plainly. When Native Christians sing hymns accompanied by traditional drums, those drums are made of deer skin and wood, created goods given by God. Their prior use does not contaminate them. The direction of worship is what matters, not the raw material. This is how Christianity has always operated. It does not pretend that culture must be scrapped and replaced wholesale, and it reorders culture toward Christ. That is not theft, it is transformation. There's another irony here that rarely gets mentioned. Much of what we know about ancient pre-Christian religions has been preserved by Christians. Pagan myths, poems, genealogies and histories survive because Christian scribes copied them, Christian scholars catalogued them, and Christian societies did not treat them as untouchable poison. The prose Edda, often cited in modern pagan reconstructions, begins with material shaped by a Christian worldview and even echoes biblical themes. That alone should make us cautious about telling overly confident stories about what pagans really believed in some pure, untouched form. So when someone claims that Christianity is little more than a patchwork of stolen pagan ideas, they are usually making several mistakes at once. They are treating paganism as a single religion when it wasn't. They are assuming that pre-Christian equals corrupt. They are confusing shared human symbols with shared meaning. And they are often relying on sources that exist only because Christians preserved them. Christmas is not a covert sun festival. It is not an embarrassment Christians forgot to cover up. It is a declaration that the light entered the world, not as an astronomical event, but as a person. Even if some cultural forms were reused, and of course they were, that does not diminish the claim being made. It sharpens it. Christianity does not say the world is evil and must be escaped. It says the world belongs to God and must be reclaimed. The question is not whether something existed before Christ. Almost everything did. The question is what it now confesses. It's also worth asking why this particular myth spread so easily and why it spreads now. The appeal isn't really historical, it's psychological. Christianity doesn't just make abstract claims about God. It makes claims about you. It claims that reality is ordered, that meaning is not self-assigned, that moral obligation is not negotiated, and that human beings are answerable to something beyond preference, power, or consensus. That makes God an inconvenient truth. And Christianity, more than any other account of God, sharpens that inconvenience. It doesn't dissolve God into vague spirituality. It doesn't reduce him to metaphor or mood. It insists on incarnation, on history, on concrete claims that either happened or did not. That makes it unusually difficult to ignore and therefore unusually threatening. So one way to lower the anxiety is not to disprove Christianity, but to domesticate it, to turn it into a remix, a collage, a thin Christian gloss painted over older myths that supposedly meant the same thing all along. If Christmas is really just sun worship, then Christ is no longer a problem. He's just a new coat of paint on a now defunct pagan practice, not the incarnate God who will judge the living and the dead, and whose kingdom will have no end. In that sense, the Christmas is pagan story functions very much like atheism often does, not primarily as a conclusion reached through careful reasoning, but as a strategy for reducing existential pressure. If Christianity can be defanged, then God can be kept at a safe distance. But history doesn't cooperate with that strategy. Christianity does not emerge as a vague synthesis of pleasant ideas. It emerges as a disruptive claim that God entered history, judged the world, forgave sins, and reordered reality around himself. And that claim is precisely what these myths are designed to soften. Christmas, rightly understood, refuses to cooperate with that softening. It does not say that light returns every year, as it always has. It says that light entered the world once, decisively, and that the world has not been the same since. And that is exactly why the story remains unsettling.